All right, moving on. My next question is about angels. It says, does the Bible say what angels look like? Question mark. Can we see them? I've seen videos recently with angels supposedly in them. Are they actually angels?
Okay. There's a couple places that describe angels. One of my favorite ones is in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 1. It talks about the cherubim, and in verse 5 it says, and from within it came the likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had four faces, each one had four wings, their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. So you got to think of feet like a cow's. So the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze, which is a gold color. The hands of a man were under their wings on their four sides. Each of the four had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the four had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces. Their wings stretched upward. Two wings of each one touched one another, and two covered their bodies. Each one went straight forward. They went wherever the Spirit wanted to go, and they did not turn when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, so they glow. Like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and out of the fire went lightning, and the living creatures ran back and forth in appearance like a flash of lightning. There's another description when you get to Ezekiel chapter 10, and in that one, it talks about the fact that they have eyes all over their bodies and all over their wings. And so there are eyes everywhere. And so, you take and picture that, four faces, legs like, feet like a calf, and four wings. That's pretty weird, with eyes all over the place. And so if that appeared in my room, I would freak out. And I think that most people would. And so that's a description of a cherub. And the plural for that is cherubim or cherubim. And you have that. When you get to the book of Daniel, though, in the book of Daniel, there are angels again described. And in that book, in Daniel chapter 10, it's I'll just give you one verse. It says, verse 18, then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man, greatly beloved. And this is a description of an angel. You see it again in verse 16. Suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips, then opened my mouth and spoke. And it goes on. And so you have this heavenly messenger in chapter 10, and he's described as looking like a man. In the book of Hebrews, in chapter 13 and verse 2, it lets us know that we need to be careful to entertain strangers. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels. And so obviously what Paul is doing in that passage is he's letting us know that we need to be hospitable, because people being hospitable to other people have actually found out that they were entertaining angels. And so, in that instance, obviously you're talking about something that looks like a man at that point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to be careful about it. A dude shows up with four faces and eyeballs all over his body. I know immediately that we're talking about a cherub there. But in this case, they come in as kind of a God's secret agent at this point. So you have to be aware of that fact. So most often in the Bible, when you see angels appearing, when they're identified as angels, they look like men. But you do have some passages that speak about the fact that they are different than men. You have another passage in Revelation chapter 4 that describes angels, and it describes them as having 6 wings and 4 different types of angels with 4 different faces and that kind of stuff. So.
All right, a couple questions. Would you say, because of what you just described, that angels are masculine and there would be no female angels, or is it just something the Bible doesn't speak of?
There's a reference in the book of Malachi to women with stork's wings, and they're carrying a basket with a lead lid on it, and there is a woman pressed down in that basket, and when she's pressed down and the lid's covers her, the statement in the passage is, "This is wickedness." And so, and the basket is taken to Shinar and left there. It's a symbol, most likely, of false religion, the woman in the basket, and it probably connects with the great whore of Babylon when you get to the book of Revelation. And obviously, the women that are carrying it with stork's wings, storks are unclean
Right.
Birds. The woman with stork's wings would be something that was satanic at that point. And so that's the only place where the Bible mentions women in kind of an angelic perspective, and it doesn't call them angels.
Yeah.
Okay. In every other passage that you have in the Bible, all the good angels are men.
So with that being said, and the ability to apparently transform or transfigure themselves, and we know from Sodom and Gomorrah, the city that wanted to rape them thought that they were men.
Right.
Does that mean that, you did a whole series on UFOs and stuff, that they can kind of make themselves shape shift as they see please? And for us, when we get our new bodies, are we going to have the post-resurrection type of ability to transform ourselves into six figures of space and do things like that?
Yeah. Well, when you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11, it says that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light.
Right.
And so, why shouldn't false teachers be able to transform themselves into teachers of righteousness? That's a point that's being made there. And so, obviously, angels can do things that make them different. In fact, Satan in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 28 is called the anointed cherub that covers. And so if Satan is a cherub, the dude's got four faces, according to Ezekiel. He's got four faces and four wings and eyes all over his body. And so that would be what Satan originally looked like on some level. Mm-hmm. So, and yet he's, it's spoken that he's the most beautiful thing that God's created. So that's not my definition of beauty
Yeah.
at this point. If when I see a cherub, I'll let you know whether or not I think he's beautiful. But I think that I would finally and ultimately agree with what God said about that. So yes, Satan, the demons are fallen angels, and so they can transform themselves. And again, you see that throughout Scripture. And so, as it says, people have entertained angels without knowing it, and angels don't appear to be men in heaven. They appear to be something else than that, other than that. And so you have that. As far as whether or not I can transform myself, I don't know if I can. Jesus, when he appeared to the disciples, he still had the marks of the resurrection, or the marks of the crucifixion. And so even though they could not identify him right at first, it may have been specifically because he had the marks of the crucifixion, which would be a pulverized face too.
Beard ripped out,
and that kind of stuff. They did identify him. Mary identified him by his voice, and so apparently Jesus' voice remained the same after he was resurrected. And so you have that. As far as being able to change our appearance, I don't know. But you're talking about 6 dimensions of space. If you are appearing in the middle of the room, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so the best description, or actually the best picture I've ever seen of that is from an old Star Trek episode. It's where they stole Spock's brain, and so there was a lady that appeared on the Enterprise bridge, and when she disappeared, what she did was folded herself up, and so basically what you saw was her squished down to a line, and then that squished down to a point, and it would have gone the other direction too. So if you're looking at me and I squish this way, then I am a two-dimensional person at that point, but I've got a dimension going this way. That would have to squish down also. Then you have to squish down from the top, and then you squish down to a point, and then the point would disappear, and you have time in there too. And so, yeah, you'd be to appear in the middle of a room, just like Jesus did, you would be folding yourself through 6 dimensions of space. Yeah. So apparently, I have a body that's just like Jesus's body, and so I'm going to be able to do that.
So it is a possibility.
And I plan on doing it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
It brings our sneaking game to a whole new level.
Exactly. Whenever I think of this, I think of sneaking up on my wife.
Yeah.
It's like I like to just stand places where she doesn't expect me and watch the reactions. And
It's one of the greatest perks about being married.
exactly.
Okay, last question.
And usually there's a penalty to it.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's beatings.
Yeah,
and
at least
things
till
that.
like 5 or 10 years, and then they're just used to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've heard, I think it's Missler, and you know how people pick on the whole serpent thing, and I don't want to open a can of worms, but how could a talking snake, whatever. And I can't remember what passage he used to describe the Satan to the serpent, whatever, but it can be similar to what we're talking about. Is it's not so comic bookish that he's actually, it could be an angel type appearance that has a serpent
Right.
persona, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things you got to remember is that angels were made before anything on the planet. They were made before the foundation of the earth. And so when you're talking about angels that have 4 faces, and one's an eagle, and another one's an ox, and a man, and so forth, you have these faces before you have the people or the animals. And so it's the animals that were styled after the angels, basically. And so you have angels with calves' feet. It's not the angels that are like calves. It's the calves that are like angels.
Right.
And the same thing with wings. Angels have wings before any animal on the earth had wings. There's a passage in the book of Isaiah, and in that passage it talks about angels there that are called the seraphim. When you look at that passage, it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, chapter 6, verse 1, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And something similar to the cherubs in Ezekiel, and also similar to the living creatures in Revelation chapter 4. When you look at the term seraphim in this passage, it is the exact same word that's used for burning fiery serpents in the book of Numbers. So you remember the story where the children of Israel are disobedient to the Lord, and these serpents come out and start biting them. And what Moses does is he takes and he makes a serpent out of bronze, puts it on a pole, raises it up, and says, if you look to the pole, if you look to the serpent, then you're going to be healed. And that's exactly what happens. Jesus in the New Testament, in John chapter 3, says, just like the serpent was raised up on the pole, so must the Son of Man be raised up. And it's a picture of Jesus becoming sin in the sense that he who knew no sin became sin so that we might be the righteousness of God in him. And so he's the one who saves us from our sin. And so with us, the serpent is something that's evil and something that's rotten, that kind of stuff. But even afterwards, you have these seraphim. It means the burning ones. That's literally what it means in Hebrew. But the burning ones, that term is the same term that's used for serpents in Numbers.
Right.
And so these angels may have a serpentine quality. And I've already talked about the fact that Ezekiel calls Satan the anointed cherub that covers. And, frankly, normally I would go, okay, he's the anointed cherub that covers, so he must be exactly like a cherubim or a cherub. And I hesitate to use the term cherub because that means fat baby, to me, And so, but that actually is the term. And so, but there's some question as to what's going on with angels. I don't know that I can define angels as cherubs and seraphs and I don't know what you call the ones in the book of Revelation in chapter 4, because it talks about 4 different angels with 4 different faces, but that might be cherubs and you're seeing them from one angle.
Yeah.
The problem is the ones in Revelation chapter 4 have 6 wings, like seraphs. And so are they seraphs or are they cherubs? And are those terms interchangeable? And so I don't know. But what I do know is that in Isaiah chapter 6, you got these angels that have some kind of serpentine quality to them. When you look in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about, instead of me quoting it, let me just read it to you. This is in Ezekiel 28, and it's in the description that's given there. It says, you talking again about Lucifer. It says, you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering: the sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald with gold. And so it talks about his covering being like he's encrusted with jewels. And if a lot of guys are into reptiles, and there are serpents that literally look like they're jewel encrusted, in the sense that they have all these different colors on them, and they're radically beautiful. And so that may be a description of that serpentine quality. So I don't know what all that means. It just blew me away the first time that I looked up the meaning of seraph and found out we're talking about a term that was used for serpents.
Yeah.
And specifically in the area of sin and the cross and all of that stuff. And so, when you're speaking about that, the serpent in the garden may have just been, well, we know that it was Satan, because the Bible clearly teaches that, but it may be Satan in this guise.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
There you go.
Very interesting.
All you wanted to know about angels.